This happened a few years ago. I never lived alone before moving into my first apartment. I went from a family home filled with constant noise to a marriage, also filled with constant noise. Not wanting to start with other baggage, I hired movers to drop off my stuff in a recently remodeled house. I arrived Friday in the afternoon, and it was just me, the quiet, and a ton of boxes. I started work on Monday and had a few days to get everything unpacked and feel settled. I got to work putting things in their new spaces and setting the place up. I started with the three most important items: my bed, my TV, and my collection of blacklight posters. It was close to midnight, and I barely had everything else shoved into rough areas. I kicked on the blacklights in the hallway and made a final trip from the living room to the bedroom, admiring my handiwork. The posters looked great, hanging there in the glow. The colors zapped and popped and warmed the space. As I got to the end of the hallway, next to the bedroom door, I noticed a weird spot on the wall. I took a closer look and saw it was a pentagram with some runic script around the edge. I hit the switch to turn off the black lights and again to turn on the black light. I looked at the space again. Nothing but a dirty off-white wall. I flicked the lights again and grabbed a portable black light. I focused on the wall and started working the light slowly up and down the wall. There were more letters appearing, a lot of them. They went down the hallway and across the front of the living room. Cussing, threats, a lot of off-center pentagrams and the phrase, "Die in your flesh, live in your pain," over and over. Some of the lettering was large, thick, and deliberate. Others seemed quick and slapped on with blurred corners and dribbled dots. At this point, I was getting worried. I had never been in an apartment by myself, let alone with the disturbing writing, and then the quiet became apparent. I could hear every creak and footstep. I moved to the kitchen and saw sketches of bodies burned in spite, roasting in the spaces above the stovetop. The bathroom was nothing but dirtiness and little upside-down crosses. I finished my inspection in the bedroom. The rest of the house was bone-chilling, but the bedroom turned out to be outright horrifying, while the rest of the rooms were filled with scattered, disturbing messages. The bedroom was more direct. On the back wall, above the bed, it read, "You will never be safe. I will come for you." I decided that was enough. I grabbed my clothes and went to a hotel for the night. I called the person who was selling the apartment the next day, and they explained that the apartment had been repainted over a bunch of vandalism. I was relieved to hear this, but I could still see the old writing through the paint. They offered me to repaint the walls, but at that point, I already lost my comfort for being there, so I told them to get me a new place. To this day, I still have flashbacks about what I saw there, and I've talked to many therapists about it. Danger comes in all forms and comes from unexpected places. Keep that in mind. I ran a handyman business out of my garage. I was insured and bonded, but didn't feel like I needed an office or a shop. Most of my gear was stored and carried in my truck, and I hung up flyers and handed out business cards all around town. Previously, I had worked 15 years in construction, and I wanted to do something else. I got a call from a woman who was having problems with her sink, so I showed up to the job. She was a busy soccer mom type and left me with some keys and an emergency number before leaving the place. The sink was a mess. Leaking spout, check. Stripped handles, check. Smelly, grinding disposal, check. And the final piece of the pie, the sink had a water filtration system that was connected to the filter in the fridge. I got to work pulling things apart when I heard a banging sound coming from the backyard. It threw me off since a mom told me she was going to pick up her kids, and to add on to the confusion, I didn't hear a car return. So I gave a quick check. They weren't my kids, but if someone walked home, I wanted to intercept them before I had a neighbor popping in for a wellness check. I checked out the area, and the best I saw was a wind knocking around a tree swing. I assumed it was an animal or something and returned to the sink. After replacing some pipes on the filtration and unclogging the disposal, I heard another set of noises, this time from down the hall. Now I was really confused because the mom didn't say anything about someone being home, but I assumed it was one of her kids. So I walked down the hall, calling out that I was there on business and that their mom would be back later. By this point, I was losing focus on the job and getting worried about a kid or a dog running around in the house. I started rushing my work, Skipping steps and repairs is a recipe for disaster, but I didn't want to be there for another second. I pulled apart the faucet and replaced the bolts, unclogged the spout, and was tightening everything down when I lost my grip and dropped my socket. It clattered into the sink, and my socket flew off the handle and into the drain. Annoyed at my error, I reached in to grab the thing. I was digging around with my hand firmly in the disposal when I heard a noise behind me and the click of a switch. I yanked my hand out as fast as I could, but managed to lose the tips of my middle and index fingers. I hit the switch and ran through the house. I checked the backyard, but there was nobody. Nothing. I decided to get the hell out of there, leaving my tools and fingers behind. I went outside to my car to get my first aid kit to wait for the woman to get back home. This is what haunts me to this day. While waiting for the woman to get back, something told me to look at the house, and when I looked up at the living room window, I saw a head looking at me, and when it saw me looking, it quickly moved behind the curtain. At that point, I called the cops and told them that there was an intruder in a client's house. When the cops arrived, they did a full search of the house and property, but found nothing. By that time, the woman had come home with her kids, wondering why the cops were there. I explained everything to the woman, and she offered me a full refund. I've never been back to that house to this day. I never figured out who or what turned on the disposal that day. But to this day, I remember cutting the power to the whole room before doing any work on their sink. It still haunts me to this day. I moved into my grandma's house shortly after her funeral. The property now belonged to my family, but it needed some cleaning and repairs before anyone could really live in it. I needed a place to live, and I was okay with helping the family, but I didn't like the old place. It was one of those turn-of-the-century homes, the last century, built by homesteaders and then upgraded in the 50s and then again in the 80s. Renovated places, especially ones that are that old, get a lot of creaks and echoes. They also suck when it comes to brownouts and general power issues. A bulb goes out on the porch and suddenly the microwave doesn't work. I'd only been there a couple of nights before I started barricading myself in one room. It was the only way I could sleep. Any new home can feel creepy or dark before you get used to it. But this was the old, strange house of an old, strange woman who died there less than 10 days before. I spent the nights trying to clean up one room after another, and the nights playing, "What the hell was that sound?" A week had gone by, and I was getting more unnerved by the place. Instead of figuring out the sources of the sound, I was finding more sounds and fewer sources. I got up after a few hours of non-sleep and was making my way to the kitchen when I heard something scraping at the window of the master bedroom. It sounded like a tree branch does when it whips against a truck driving through a forest, but there was no tree on that side of the house. It was windy outside, and that intensified some sounds while muffling others. It also had my skin crawling, even if I heard nothing but the wind. I made my way to the bedroom in the dark. I had a flashlight, but didn't want to give myself away if there was somebody there. As I got closer, I could hear someone yelling. I recognized the voice and the demeanor from Grandma's funeral. It was a loud drunk bum that had to be removed. He kept yelling about how Grandma had taken it, and he would get it back. I ducked underneath the window and listened. Sure enough, in between scraping at the wall, he was still yelling about it, whatever that was. He was yelling louder, and the scraping also got louder. I started to creep out of the room when the window shattered. He spotted me and yelled to give it back. I ran to the room and barricaded the door. I could hear him screaming, "Give it back!" and thumping from the master bedroom. I called the police and waited with the door locked and barricaded with furniture until I saw flashing lights. The police walked through the master bedroom with me. The man was gone. The room was tossed. Underneath the mattress was a small compartment built into the box spring. There was nothing there. Whatever it was, the man had taken it. I don't know what the man was looking for, but I'm just grateful that I am okay.